Hello, and welcome back to Let's Get Lit. In today's video, we're going to go over stave 3 of Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. So, let's continue and see where we left off, shall we? This chapter starts out with Scrooge waking up from a deep sleep. Again, the bell tolls 1 in the morning. The narrator lets us know that Scrooge was up for anything. He was readying himself mentally for whatever was about to happen to him next. As soon as the clock struck 1, nothing happened, which made Scrooge feel uneasy. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then a quarter of an hour passed and nothing more happened. As he lays back down in his bed, he can see a blaze of light streaming from under the door and hitting the clock. Scrooge began to wonder where the source of the light was coming from and thought this might be the source of the next ghost. So Scrooge gets up, shuffles in his slippers, and off to the door. As Scrooge puts his hand on the door, the ghost calls for him from behind it, telling him to come in. When Scrooge opens the door, he sees that it is in his bedroom. However, now everything has been decked out and looks stunning. There are holly branches and berries everywhere, food and drinks galore. There is a whole mountain of goodies and foods to feast on. As Scrooge was looking at everything, the ghost tells him to come in and to know him better. As Scrooge enters the room, he does not dare to look at the next spirit. However, the spirit tells him to look at his presents, and Scrooge does. To Scrooge's surprise, this spirit is drastically different from the previous one. This is the Ghost of Christmas Present. He was clothed in a deep green robe bordered with white fur. The garment hung loosely on the figure, and its feet were observable beneath the wardrobe, and they seemed to be bare. On his head was a crown made of holly wreath. His face was nice and kind, his eyes were sparkling, and he had a cheery voice. Scrooge tells the spirit that he learned a lesson from the previous one, and if this spirit were to do the same, Scrooge would benefit from it, and he'll go wherever the spirit commands him. The spirit tells him to touch his robe, and Scrooge does. In an instant, everything in the room vanishes without a trace, along with the room itself. Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present end up on the streets of London on Christmas morning. The narrator describes the sights and sounds that they see while standing there. From people doing their chores on the roofs, to children making snowballs and throwing them at each other, to all the fresh fruits and foods and vegetables and pastries and everything galore. To the cakes, to the coffee, to teas that can be smelled through the air, everything just looks beautiful. All of this set against a somewhat dreary landscape of the black roofs of London. But the narrator notes that the atmosphere feels just as jolly and as happy as if it were a summer day. Soon the church bells ring and everyone gathers into church for the sermon. On the streets, Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Present are walking about. They noticed some homeless men walking by. As they walked by, the spirit sprinkled incense on their dinners with his torch. Then the narrator notes that this kind of torch was very uncommon, and it was shaped like a cornucopia, and wherever the spirit uses his torch, people's negative or sour attitudes changed, so they were filled with Christmas cheer. Scrooge asks, use this on anyone's dinner, to which the spirit says yes, but particularly for the poor. And Scrooge asks, well, why the poor? To which the spirit responds that the poor are the ones who need it the most. Scrooge and the spirit then have a small conversation about people and to manipulate Christmas to their own advantage. And the spirit says that these people have nothing to do with or know the true meaning of Christmas, and that they are strangers to him. Next, the spirit and Scrooge walked to Bob Cratchit's house. The narrator gives us a little bit of history about Bob Cratchit and his family. Bob Cratchit's wife and all of the children. The narrator also tells us that Bob Cratchit's house is very small and can hardly hold everyone inside of it. The narrator also tells us that 2 young children come inside eager to get the goose for Christmas dinner. We also see one of Bob's daughters, Martha, who had just come home from work. She's a little later than usual, but tells her mom that work ran late. Then we see Bob and Tiny Tim come in from church. The narrator tells us that Tiny Tim has a small crutch and an iron cast. When Bob and Tiny Tim come inside, everyone surprises him and he hugs everyone, and they are all happy to see each other. He puts Tiny Tim on the floor, and the other siblings go out to help Tiny Tim wash up and get ready for dinner. The 2 younger children run out to grab the goose to be prepared. As they are gone, Bob and his wife talk, and Bob lets her know that Tiny Tim has a crutch and has issues, but still is just as joyful as ever. And that when they were at church, he told his father that he hopes everyone in the congregation can see him and remember who helped the blind man see and the lame man walk. Everyone begins to set the table for Christmas dinner, and all the last-minute efforts are put into the food, and the food is placed on the table. They say grace, and then everyone begins to eat all the delicious food that's been prepared. Once dinner has been served, it is then time for dessert. Miss Cratchit was having doubts that her Christmas pudding would turn out well. She was worried about the flour and the heat and everything about it, from not coming out of the pan to everything else. However, when she goes to get it, everything seems right and perfect. The narrator says that she puts brandy on top of the pudding and lights it and puts it on fire. and then she sticks a holly branch into the top of it. Scrooge comments about how small the pudding is for such a large family, but that no one in the Cratchit house was going to dare say a word. They thought it was the best thing ever. After dinner, they all gather around in a small circle, and Mr. Cratchit begins to pour a small amount of drink into cups for a toast. He wishes for God to bless them all, and the family repeats this, with Tiny Tim being the last one, saying, "God bless us, everyone." Scrooge asks if the child is going to be okay, to which the ghost says that in the very near future, if changes are not made, there will be a crutch without an owner. Scrooge says that this cannot be, nor should it happen, to which the ghost of Christmas Present says, "What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population." When Scrooge hears his own words quoted against him, he cannot stand it. The ghost of Christmas Present says that no man has the right to judge who should live and who should die. And the ghost of Christmas Present thinks that children like Tiny Tim deserve to be alive way more than people like Scrooge. Scrooge then hears his name and then turns back to the household. Bob Cratchit was raising a toast to Scrooge, the founder of the feast. Bob's wife was not too happy about this. She wished Scrooge were there so she could give him a piece of her mind. However, Bob says that it's Christmas and they should wish him a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Bob's wife does this only because he asks her to. For the next few minutes, this was the only time there wasn't Christmas cheer in the house. But about 5 minutes later, they're all back to being their bright spirits and the holidays and everything else. Bob Cratchit lets Peter, one of his sons, know that he might have found a job for him after all, and it would pay pretty decently. Martha told everyone about her job working for the milliner, and not too long ago she saw a lord and lady walk in. The whole family talks for a while, and soon they're off to bed one by one. Scrooge was watching them. He took notes of everyone in the household, especially Tiny Tim. Soon they begin to walk down the streets of London, and they can see everyone preparing dinners for their family. They also note of people running into the streets to meet up with their friends and family and more. As Scrooge is seeing this, the ghost of Christmas Present opens his hand, and the light that was shining before him shines out now into the streets, filling everywhere with light and with Christmas cheer. To Scrooge's surprise, the ghost of Christmas Present then takes him to a bleak and deserted moor where there's a very small shack, and inside of it is an old man and wife and their children and their children's children. And though the outside was black and bleak and dim, inside everyone wished each other a Merry Christmas and began to sing a Christmas carol. The ghost then takes them to a lighthouse with two workers who are sitting at a table having their dinner. The old man and the young man both exchange Christmas pleasantries towards one another. Then the ghost takes them out onto a ship over the water where all of the crewmen are working about. But each one of them also had a kind word about Christmas, or was humming a Christmas carol, or exchanging pleasantries with one another. From this scene, Scrooge can hear laughing, and not just any kind of laughter, but a certain distinct laugh. The laugh of his nephew. The ghost then suddenly transports him to his nephew's house. Here, Scrooge can see a group of about 20 people all gathered together having fun and making merriment. The narrator tells us of the activities that are going on around the house. Some talking, some have fun and games, but all on a display full on for Scrooge. Scrooge sees his nephew and his niece engaged in a conversation. Through this conversation, we learn that Scrooge's nephew wishes well of his uncle. His niece can't quite understand where his nephew is coming from, but the nephew starts to explain. He tells his wife that every year he offers Scrooge to come over and visit and to make merriment for Christmas, to which every year Scrooge refuses. However, Fred, the nephew, tells his wife that they are not losing out on anything, but Scrooge is the one who is truly missing out. Fred believes that it would be really good for Ebenezer to come and make merriment with him and to have a good time, instead of being left alone with his thoughts on Christmas. Throughout the rest of the evening, all of the party guests play a game and have fun with each other, and they all make merriment. At the end of all the games, Fred makes a toast to his Uncle Scrooge, and everyone joins with him in toasting. Throughout this entire event, the ghost of Christmas Present notices a drastic shift in Scrooge's attitude. Throughout the games and all the merriment, Scrooge acted as if he were there and participating with all the guests. It wasn't until the very end that Scrooge had asked if he could stay for one more game and to watch it play out, to which the ghost of Christmas Present says they cannot and must be on their way. The ghost of Christmas Present then takes him everywhere, all around the country, to foreign lands, to jail cells, to sick beds in the hospitals, you name it, they went, and everywhere in these places, people were wishing others good Christmas cheer. The narrator notes that though it was only for what was supposed to be a short time, it felt like even longer. Then Scrooge looks up at the ghost of Christmas Present and can tell that all of his hair has started to turn gray. He asks the spirit, are their lives very short? To which the ghost responds that his life upon the globe was very brief, and that it will all end tonight. Scrooge is flabbergasted by this answer, and then the chimes of the clock ring out 11:15 at the exact moment. Scrooge then says that he sees something strange belonging to the spirit, and it looks like a foot or a claw. And the spirit opens his robes, and from inside 2 children come out, a boy and a girl. We learn that the boy is ignorance and the girl is want. The spirit tells him to beware of these 2 creatures. Scrooge asks if they are the spirits, to which the spirit says no. They are man's, and they cling to the spirit, appealing. The spirit tells him to beware of these 2, but especially for the boy, for on his brow it is written doom, unless the writing be erased. The spirit tells Scrooge to deny it and to slander those who tell it to you. Scrooge asks if there is no refuge or resource, but the spirit uses Scrooge's words against him. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? At this moment the bell strikes 12. Scrooge looks around but cannot find the ghost at all. The last stroke he remembered the prediction of Jacob Marley. His eyes then turn and behold a solemn phantom draped and hooded coming like the mist towards him. This concludes chapter 3 of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So tune in next time as we go over chapter 4 and see what this spooky spirit has to say. Have a great day, and as always, stay lit.